Just 4 minutes ago, something happened inside the royal council that could change the monarchy forever. Camilla had entered the chamber as queen consort, but moments later, her position was stripped away and the authority she had spent years protecting was handed directly to Catherine. Then, as the final decision was read aloud, Camilla reached for a chair and suddenly collapsed. But what happened inside that council chamber was far more serious than a simple change of title, because hidden behind the decision was a power struggle that had been building inside the palace for weeks. Inside the royal council chamber, the atmosphere was unlike anything the palace had seen in years. Senior royal figures sat in complete silence as the council secretary prepared to read the final decision. Camilla stood near the end of the table, still believing that whatever was about to happen could somehow be stopped. Then the secretary began reading. Her senior ceremonial position was being removed, and the responsibilities attached to it would immediately be transferred to Catherine. For several seconds, Camilla didn't move. Charles remained silent. William watched from across the chamber, and Catherine wasn't even there. That detail would become crucial, because Catherine had not asked for Camilla's position. She had not been warned that the council was about to make this decision, and yet within minutes, she would become the person standing where Camilla had spent years trying to remain. But why had the council gone this far? The answer was hidden inside a sealed document sitting on the table, a document that only a handful of people had been allowed to read. The document was not part of the public announcement. It was a sealed appendix attached to the council's decision, and its contents went far beyond a ceremonial title. According to the document, the council had been reviewing a series of internal incidents involving palace instructions, staff communications, and decisions that had allegedly been changed after receiving royal approval. At first, the incidents appeared unrelated, but when the records were placed side by side, the council noticed a disturbing pattern. Instructions approved by the king had apparently reached palace staff differently from the way they had originally been issued, and several of those changes affected Catherine's official responsibilities. William had already noticed the pattern, but he hadn't expected to see it connected to Camilla's office. Then he turned to the final page of the appendix. There was something there that made the entire room go silent. The king's signature was missing. Charles had been given the document, but he had not signed the final order, so the question became even more dangerous. Was Charles trying to stop the decision, or was he trying to protect Camilla from what the council had already decided? The council's decision had not started with the title. It had started weeks earlier, during a private royal ceremony where almost no one realized that a power struggle was unfolding. Catherine had been given a prominent position in the official receiving line. The arrangement had been approved through the proper royal channels. But shortly before the rehearsal began, the list was changed. Catherine's name was moved. Camilla's position was elevated. Most people in the room saw nothing unusual. William did. He noticed that the change had been made after the original instruction had already been approved. And when he privately questioned Camilla about it, her response reportedly made the situation even more serious. She told him that Catherine needed to understand the difference between public popularity and royal rank. William said nothing more. But that conversation did not end in the corridor. It reached Princess Anne, and Anne understood something the others had been trying to avoid. This was no longer simply a disagreement between two women inside the royal family. If official instructions from the king could be changed without his approval, then the problem was much bigger than Catherine. It was a direct challenge to the way authority moved through the monarchy, and that was the moment the palace's private conflict became a constitutional problem. That evening, Charles finally decided he could no longer ignore what was happening. He asked Camilla to meet him privately. No cameras, no public advisors, just the two of them, facing the documents that had brought the palace to this point. Charles placed the altered instructions on the table. Then he asked one question. "Did you change these orders after they left my office?" Camilla didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the documents and then at her husband. She knew exactly what they meant. Charles had spent years defending her position. He had stood beside her through public criticism, controversy, and relentless scrutiny. But now, for the first time, he was asking her to give up part of the authority she had fought so hard to protect. Camilla refused. She warned Charles that surrendering her influence would make her powerless inside the very institution she had spent decades trying to belong to. And then she reminded him of something far more personal, something he had promised her long before he became king. Charles went silent, because now he was facing an impossible choice: protect the woman he loved, or protect the institution he had sworn to serve. And by the end of that conversation, Charles made a decision that would eventually place Camilla's title in the hands of Catherine. Charles had made his position clear, but the palace was already moving beyond a private family discussion. The matter was now in the hands of the royal council. Senior officials reviewed the altered instructions, the delayed communications, and the growing concerns from palace staff. Their conclusion was difficult to ignore. This was no longer about who was more popular. It was about whether royal instructions could be changed after the king had approved them. William and Anne were present as the council reviewed the evidence. Neither of them could simply remove Camilla from her position, but both understood what was at stake. Then the sealed appendix was opened. Inside were records showing that several important briefings connected to Catherine had allegedly been delayed or altered before reaching her. One of those briefings involved a major royal event. Catherine had nearly arrived. Without information she was expected to have already received. William looked toward his father. For Charles, that was the moment the argument changed completely. He could no longer treat the situation as a misunderstanding between family members. The council then offered Camilla one final chance. She could surrender the disputed authority voluntarily, keep selected privileges, and allow the palace to describe the change as a graceful transition. But Camilla refused. She believed accepting the offer would mean admitting that everything she had spent years fighting for had finally been taken away. And by refusing, she unknowingly pushed the council toward the one decision that could no longer be reversed. The next morning, Charles went to Camilla with one final offer. He could not stop the council completely, but he could still protect part of her position. She could step back voluntarily, keep selected ceremonial privileges, retain some of her staff, and leave the palace with her dignity intact. Charles told her this was the last opportunity to avoid a formal removal. Camilla listened in silence. Then she asked him a question. "After everything you promised me, you really expect me to surrender?" Charles had no easy answer. He still wanted to protect her, but he could no longer ignore the evidence placed before the council. Camilla eventually took the document and read it from beginning to end. Then she refused to sign. She believed accepting the agreement would make it look as though she had admitted defeat. Instead, she told her private secretary that she would never willingly surrender the position she had spent decades protecting. Charles left the room devastated. He had offered her a way out. She had rejected it. And now there was only one path left. The royal council would have to make the decision for her. By midday, the palace staff received new instructions. Camilla's reporting lines would change. Her official duties would be reassigned, and the authority connected to her position would begin moving into Catherine's household. But neither woman knew that their next meeting would be the most emotional moment of the entire crisis. For the first time since the crisis began, Camilla and Catherine were finally alone. No Charles, no William, no advisors, no royal officials standing between them. Only two women, and a decision that had completely changed both of their lives. Camilla entered the room looking exhausted. Catherine was already waiting. Between them sat the document that had transferred Camilla's authority to Catherine. Camilla looked at it for several seconds before asking the question she had been holding back all morning. "Did you know this was going to happen?" Catherine immediately shook her head. She told Camilla she had never asked for her removal and had not even known the council was going to act that morning. But then Catherine said something unexpected. She admitted that receiving the new position had not made her feel victorious. It had made her feel deeply uncomfortable, because she understood exactly what the title represented, and exactly what Camilla had lost. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Camilla finally lowered her guard. She admitted that Catherine's growing popularity had frightened her. Every new sign of public trust made her wonder whether the palace was slowly moving beyond her, and that fear had gradually turned into control. Catherine listened carefully. She didn't excuse what had happened, but for the first time, she saw something beneath Camilla's actions that she hadn't seen before. It wasn't simply ambition, it was fear of becoming irrelevant. Then Camilla pushed the transfer document across the table, and what she told Catherine next would stay with the future queen for years.